go ahead and jump into today's conversation. My goal is to try to keep this short, sweet, and tight within maybe 30, 35 minutes. That we can do a ton of question and answer as well. But I mentioned beforehand, this was kind of a spur of the moment webinar that we decided to host, after reading the Netforum Association Trend Study. So for those of you not familiar with it, I'm going to go ahead and share this back out after we chat here, if not today, sometime tomorrow. But it's a pretty well put together, very well put together study, as is most things that Community Brands does, to get a pulse and kind of what are your key initiatives and things that you guys at associations are A, focused on, and B, also potentially kind of keeping you guys up and worried about at night. What I will say is one thing that wasn't asked here that I was a little bit surprised when it comes to like concerns or challenges that you feel might be impacting you is I think the demographic of membership. From some of our research and some of our findings, as if most membership-based associations trying to target, engage, and retain a younger demographic of membership is actually a high priority for the long-term sustainability of your organization. So that was one thing I didn't see here, but everything else that they put on here, I 100% agree. And we can kind of summarize it here just a little bit, but I think at the end of the day, we're all in agreement that we want to focus on creating operational efficiencies. You guys wear a lot of different hats every single day. And so how do we kind of help you wear the right hat for the right task at hand? We're also very, very, very focused on engagement, which is a term that I absolutely love to use, not just member engagement and building loyalty, but also volunteer and community engagement. And then also, it seems as if I read this correctly, there's a lot of innovators in the room. So a lot of us are forward thinking about like what's the ever-changing environment and landscape look like for technology, including things like the utilization of AI, and then also data security and privacy. Actually very, very, very surprised to see such a high percent of people focus on data security and privacy, only because it's not a very fun, sexy conversation to have, but it is absolutely critical, especially in light of what's gone on the last couple of years. So again, I will send this out. I don't want to unpack the whole thing here today. What I really want to do, though, is I want to unpack how this relates to some of your award programs and some of your events. And the reason why I want to do that is one of the elements that was in that study, I'm going to come back to introductions here in a minute, is that 90% of you, so I mean, darn near every single one of you in the year 2025 will be prioritizing your events or your recognition awards. And so unless I'm drastically misspeaking and I only have the 10% on this call, that implies that nearly all of you guys are going to be doing not only recognition awards, but it's going to be a priority for you. And it makes total sense, right? 76% of you also talked about how the applicant experience as well as the volunteer experience is one of the driving vehicles for member engagement. And what better way to engage your audience and engage your membership than through events such as recognition programs. Also, going back to my first comment that I made here about striving to attract and retain a younger demographic of member, a program like a 30 under 40 or a 40 under 40 type of award structure is a very low-hanging, easy type of program for you guys to offer to start to engage them very, very early on. So none of these metrics here surprise me. The things that do surprise me, though, is some of the yet sections at the bottom, right? So I'm not going to go deep into all these metrics, but one of the things that kind of came up was most of the organizations surveyed felt that their current utilization and tech stack was either averaging or lacking. I tossed in the terminology modern from some of the studies that we've done. So we all agree that we want to use tech. We all agree that we want to engage applicants through technology, yet we feel currently our current tech stacks are lacking. When it gets to awards specifically, the general consensus here is that we're using our association management softwares as kind of the main hub to run them, or we're not using any tool whatsoever. So a lot of paper, emails, spreadsheets, Google Drives, built-in Survey Monkeys, things like that. Now, I totally understand some of you might be using a dedicated tool to run your programs. That's great, but you are the minority here based on these studies. The other thing, too, that we want to focus on is a lot of the operational aspects to it is we want to create internal efficiencies. That was a common trend. Internal efficiencies, I want to streamline my internal daily operations. But when you get into event making, specifically things like award programs, abstract collection, scholarships if you have a foundation arm, internally, you actually make up only 33 or less % of the participation, right? Your applicants, your nominators, your board members, your volunteers, they make up a much significant greater percentage. So While I love the general like make our lives easier concept, we should also probably put them at the forefront of all of that thinking. And so as a membership-based association or a nonprofit, I've got 10 years of experience, if not more. It's easy for us to kind of roll up our sleeves, right, and kind of hash out the dirty work to get things done. But we can't have those same expectations for our membership and for our volunteers. And that's kind of really what brings us full circle to today's conversation. So started the company in 2012, and we did so in your shoes. So we lived the life as a volunteer. So we were donating our time to both membership-based associations, nonprofits, charities, etc., for all these programs that we just talked about. And back at that point in time, a typical day in the life for us was paper. So we literally, when it came to like things like award programs, would have hundreds and hundreds of physical binders being mailed to us. I know I'm not a terribly old person at this point, but I am kind of feeling dated when I make those comments because that's what life was like. And we were tasked with handwriting notes and feedback and scores and mailing it back in. We'd have the 8 to 10 hour weekend committee meetings with the board members that kind of hash out the details and came up with selections. We also went that transitionary period where organizations were using email, spreadsheets, Google Drive, Dropbox links, you name it. And quite frankly, as a volunteer, that quote unquote technology made our lives significantly more challenging. At least with the binders, they were centralized. Now we're using like 8 or 9 different tools that really weren't intended for the task at hand. And then we started to see some really terrible things happening. So applications that got submitted via email would go to spam. So we would sit down, go through reviews, and then find out months later that not even all of the qualified candidates were included in the selection. And we started to see firsthand biases from review committee members because they weren't redacting the data. And so they knew who the members were, they had personal biases, and that clouded their judgment. So these are the experiences that led us to build Reviewr, which at this point in time runs, thousands and thousands of these campaigns every single year, working very, very closely with those AMSs. So kind of full circle, the reason why I asked those questions on what AMSs and what tools are you using is because we want to work alongside them. These are fun conversations to have because 2 years ago, as we talked to associations, most people said that they use manual processes to run their award programs. Then about the last year or so, a large number of people started saying, yeah, we use our AMS and all of the tools that they have baked into it. Now, over the course of the last 8 to 10 months, many of those same organizations are coming back to us saying, hey, we use our AMSs because they had some of the components to run it. However, we now realize that we need a dedicated award management software because it's the right tool for the right task. And that's obviously now where we're having today's conversation. So if I jump ahead here just a little bit, then we'll get going. The TLDR version of this is basically kind of calling out the elephant in the room. And the goal here for today is, 76% of you, these aren't my numbers, these are pulled directly from the Trend Survey, are saying that member engagement is one of, if not your highest priority. Because of that, you will be offering member recognition awards to power those type of member engagement campaigns. All of us agree that creating efficiencies through technology is a high priority, yet many of us either don't feel we have the current tools that we need to be successful or that they're lacking. So with kind of awards in mind, very little or any kind of tech is currently being utilized. So how can we kind of sit back and say that we want to prioritize member engagement as well as award programs, but not use the right tool at the right time? So this kind of is a kind of a call to arms that says, look, let's kind of get rid of some of these hack together processes, these different types of tools. Let's try to centralize these processes into a dedicated hub. And so my goal today is to kind of walk through like what the kind of grass is greener, what the light looks like at the other end of the door will look like for many of you. So with that said, I want to focus on the terminology experience. And so with these award programs, there really are 3 of them. So I want to walk through kind of the best practices to running these campaigns that would kind of help you accommodate those goals from the survey. But then also kind of sharing some industry best practices and trends and things that we're seeing within the space. So from an experience perspective, there's 3 of them. There's your team's experience, operationally speaking. There's the applicant's experience, which is elevating the membership and elevating the members process. And then there's the built-in review, judging, scoring, selection team's experience. Oftentimes they're volunteers. And so again, what do we do as far as providing the right tools for the right task at the right time? So I want to kind of start by introducing a concept for your nomination process, and that's breaking into 2 key components. So historically speaking, many awards were open call for nominations. There was a lack of participation, and then when you would go to do a review, you were basically reviewing the content that the nominator said about the nominee. Now, the downside to that is that you're missing information. So who doesn't want a one-to-one direct communication mechanism with your membership, right? Number 2 is that who knows more about themselves than the nominee. So what we started to see a big trend here in the last couple of years is breaking your awards into two core components. One's an open call for nominations. So the general idea here is to increase the volume of participation. So, from a marketing perspective, we're going to have a lot more people involved in it. It's a very, very low barrier. There really isn't any excuse to participate. And then the second component to that would be actually letting the nominee know that they were nominated, and kind of the Oscars or the Emmy Awards. The nominee would then join the process, and they would start to submit either A, some of the more personal details about themselves for data accuracy, and then B, they're going to help kind of build a narrative around themselves to give themselves the highest chance of obviously achieving the award, because they're going to put forth more time, more energy than the nominator would put about them, just because they know themselves better. The last kind of component to that too is references. So I'm not sure how many of you guys are collecting references with your awards. I know it's very, very common with both abstracts and scholarships. But if that is the case, how do we lower the barrier for those that are submitting references? Consolidate them all into one centralized hub. So the goal here, again, from an applicant's perspective, is to lower the barrier, increase volume, have higher quality entries, and provide a much more engaging experience for them. It's almost 2025. I can firmly say that most members do not want to be downloading forms from the website, working offline, recompiling them into like Adobe Acrobat, sending you an email, or filling out online forms. They want an interactive online portal for the entire award nomination structure and process. So what does that look like? Here's an example of the National Association of Realtors. Again, they do a 30 under 30, very much like the reason why I mentioned earlier on. The goal here is to help identify, retain, and attract a younger demographic of membership for the long-term viability and sustainability of the association. I think it's overall a very well-structured program doing everything I just talked about. So they're keeping their branding intact. Obviously, they're creating a seamless, cohesive experience between their website and then our portal. But this is kind of the key differentiator here is we physically cannot have people sending you a bunch of deliverables and documents. You can't be going onto your AMS or to your built-in databases, finding all of your submissions, downloading them, exporting them, recompiling them into spreadsheets, and then shipping them off to the review team. We want to have a concept called a profile. And the idea behind a profile is that all those activities that I just referenced, nominator, nominee, submission forms, file uploads, communications, selections, all of those get stored in one centralized hub automatically for you. There's no disconnected processes. The applicants can save, they can log out, they can come back later. Again, it just lowers the barrier for them. It seems like very small things, but it's a fully integrated award management structure. Now, if you are using an AMS that we can partner with, this will actually get replaced with single sign-on. So if you're using, say, for example, like Netforum or Unpack Netforums, whatever it might be, they would sign in with their existing membership information, and then they would proceed on to the forms. Now, again, this is kind of that dramatic change in methodology of how we see many, many awards being ran. By no means is this the only way to do it. We have lots and lots of our clients that will have like an open call for nominations. It could be a self-application. There's no right or wrong way. This, however, is that dual process. So again, the goal here was to A, boost volume, and then B, boost quality. So to do so, there's an open call for nominations, which is basically saying, hey, who are you as a nominator? Who are you nominating and why? That's virtually it. There's no more data being collected. And the idea here is that we're going to have just inherently a significant number of nominations because there is such a little barrier to participate. Now, the key to this obviously is A, the nominator can now go and they can submit additional nominations if they want to, but it actually sends an email notification to the nominee letting them know that they are nominated for this year's 30 under 30 or this year's XYZ category. And then they click a link to accept that nomination. This then brings them directly into their nomination portal. And so they're obviously greeted with a welcome message, and they start to fill out the bulk of their application. We also want to, again, provide a very good experience in the sense that we don't want people who are not eligible to be able to apply, right? We don't want to waste their time. We also want to waste your time. So the idea here is that they can kind of put in some information about themselves. If they're not eligible, it actually stops them. If they are eligible, they're able to proceed on. Then it gets into the bulk of the nomination form. So everything you see here is highly customizable. I'm not going to get too deep in this just because the goal here isn't to actually demo here forms. It's more so to kind of talk about if you're not using tools like this, then kind of where are we missing out as far as member engagement, as well as operations. But you can kind of see here that all of these details, and this is a very niche program, physically could not be submitted by the nominator. Like the nominator isn't going to know the member ID number. They're not going to know all these metrics about the nominee. They're probably going to be working with them regardless. Things like resumes and file uploads, again, nominators just won't have that. So this actually goes directly to the source and says, hey, Ryan, the nominee, now it's your turn to either add to what was said about you or fill out these additional forms. So they're adding a bunch of metrics. If you are doing file uploads, we'll kind of get back into that. The bulk of most of these award programs are short answer essay content. With that said, we have seen a tremendous number of video submissions as well, both video nominations as well as video applications. They're tremendous marketing collateral for you guys to use at your galas to kind of celebrate the award recipients. Where this becomes quite challenging is you probably don't want to collect that from everybody. And so if you don't have a tool like Reviewr, you're basically forced to collect it either all up front or never at all. With a platform like Reviewr, you can actually break your submission workflows and processes up into multi-steps. So maybe only those that get selected or the finalists are then coming back into their portal and they're adding those videos or adding those headshots for marketing purposes. So that's, again, kind of the benefit behind having a dedicated portal versus just, built-in web forms or using your AMS. So in this example, the applicant fills out their form. It then gets into the references. So I'm going to kind of come back to this here in a different example. But references are a common emerging trend that we've started to see when it comes to an award program. You could also think of this as additional nominations about the nominee. Why this works really well is what you're trying to do is build a comprehensive and compelling story around your nominees to kind of figure out who is the most deserving. The challenge with most references is in a letter format and it comes in at the last minute, and then you're tasked with trying to figure out who does it belong to, what is that deliverable, how are you going to collect it, and then trying to attach it back to the right person. So in this example, and we can kind of look at it here, what's going to end up happening is the applicant puts in the name and email of the reference, and it actually sends them a direct notification saying, hey, so-and-so, you've been asked to submit a reference on behalf of Kyle, click here to do so. Once you click on it, it actually brings them right into the reference submission. Now, to be clear, this is where things change pretty dramatically. And this is, again, a trend that we don't want references to fill out letters because it's often a better reflection on their writing capabilities and less so about the nominee. So what we're doing here is we're asking the reference to fill out a template. So again, it lowers the barrier for them. It elevates their experience. They can say they can come back later, and then they just simply fill it out. Now, once they're done, it actually drops the reference directly back into the applicant's profile. So I'll come back to that here in just a minute. So to kind of summarize here before we kind of keep moving on, the general idea here is you have to think through awards, abstracts, scholarships, all these type of submission-based review programs as experiences. And we have to get out of the thought process of thinking them as just a submission experience, because collecting data itself is not challenging. Doing something with it is what is challenging. What's going to end up happening with most traditional programs, if you're using your AMS or virtually any other manual processes, is now you have to go and fetch and find, typically through reports and spreadsheets, all of your submissions, download them, export them, recompile them, and then somehow, in some way, shape, or form, get that in the hands of your review team to conduct a selection. And then from there, you need to collect all of their feedback, recompile it to justify who your results and winners might be. So we do this again by breaking this into three core components: the submission experience, and then kind of moving on is the operation experience. So again, I kind of noted this here, bullet points, is that again, we have to think through that there are so many moving parts to running these award programs. There's the submissions, but then on top of that, you have to monitor progress. There's going to be communication that goes on. You have to create these review workflows, especially if you have multiple awards or multiple categories. How do you start to pair up your submissions with the review teams? Obviously, you have to redact information. There's going to be multi-phase programs. There's reporting capabilities. And so if your current award process or scholarship process or abstract process requires you to start somewhere and then go somewhere else to take action on these items, then it's probably not a good fit for what you're trying to accomplish. We should be able to run these entire campaigns in one centralized hub. So with that said, where we kind of step in our Reviewr is give you these command centers. And so you can right away see all of your programs that are being powered, what's going on. So how many days until your deadlines, how many submissions you've received, where are they in the process? Are they nominators in progress? Was the nominee notified, but that they haven't done anything with yet? Have they completely finished the full-on conversion tracking? Show us our external deliverables, like our references. Have they been requested but not done? Are they done? Send them automated reminder messages. All of the dates and deadlines at your fingertips to make changes on the fly. On top of that, the ability to kind of go and view your submissions. So again, historically speaking, as nominations or applications come in, you're tasked with finding them, viewing them, exporting them, downloading them. In Reviewr, we actually give you this full-blown menu, and it will show you a list literally of every single nominee or applicant that you've received. You can sort and filter by your different award types or different categories or different stages. And then once you open the applicant up, it actually shows you all of their comprehensive information in one centralized hub. So what we're able to do here is see Ryan's our nominee, and I can see all the content we collected either from Ryan or on behalf of him or her. So we have our drop downs, our short answers, our essays. We can directly communicate one-to-one with our applicants. So I can send direct feedback or messages to my applicants. I can internally collaborate, so I can leave notes or feedback about a particular applicant, share it with my team. File uploads are all centralized, so literally every single file that was ever uploaded, photos, videos, PowerPoint, spreadsheets, PDFs, you name it, shows up in this list, and you can simply press the view button and it embeds that document smack dab in front of me. If I want to check out references or any additional nominations that were submitted about Ryan, I would actually see a line item or a list of all of them. And then when I click into it, it actually shows me what was said about my nominator. So for those of you that might be using your AMS, again, this is where the single sign-on is extremely helpful because people are coming in through one centralized hub. But with your AMS, you basically have a contact record for your nominees. That's all you hold on to. In this workflow, we literally have all the nomination, quote unquote, virtual packet tied to their name. Who are they, their file uploads, what was said about them, any communication that's gone on, and then of course the review and selection process, which we're going to get to next. And so that's where I think we really want to spend some time here is thinking through, great, we've collected all these award applications, we have all of our nominations, it's a well-oiled machine, we're super hyper efficient. Now we have to make a decision on how do we take those submissions or those applications and then send it to our team for some type of judging, review, scoring, selection process. And that in itself can be incredibly complex. From some of the metrics that we have, on average, most of your volunteers physically cannot look at more than 15 nominations. They just don't have the mental or the time capacity to do so. So if you're asking them to review 50, 60, 70 award nominations, how can we kind of guarantee that the 45th person got the same energy or the same experience as the first one? We really can't. But with that said, how do we kind of create a structure or an ecosystem where we can kind of fairly take your applications and then divvy it out to your committees and divvy it out to your teams to do a review in a way that's both sensitive to the time, but also at the same time getting enough information back to make sure that we're selecting the right people. And so that's kind of where we get into two things here. One is workflows, and then two is the actual selection itself, which hopefully you are using some type of score sheets or rubrics. So for me personally, if there's any way that we can break out our awards into buckets, I want to do so. Either award categories, it could be phases of review. So again, the internal vetting phase. Phase 2 might be, a different team using a scorecard, and then they narrow it down to the top 10 for your executive team to make the final selection. That's one example. You could do that in conjunction with phases, or you want to create committees or pods, right? So if you have 100 submissions, maybe you want to say, let's just break this into groups of 10, right? 10 people reviewing 10 submissions. So there's a lot of ways to do that. But there has to be a way for you to physically move those submissions to those individuals. We really can't have any member data being exported, downloaded, and transmitted via email whatsoever. So it's all about accessibility. Number two is when you go to do a review, how are you actually selecting them? We have to get away from complete subjective controls. So we want our board members or our review committees just kind of saying, yeah, I think Kyle is this year's award recipient because I love him, right? There has to be a mathematic-based reasoning behind it. On top of that, we have to create structure in a way that every one of our evaluators or the review team members have the similar expectations of what's being asked from them. We want them all to look at the nominations through the same lens. We want them to have a set expectation of what to look for and how to conduct the review. That way, when you go to kind of do your selections, we can ensure that it was done in a very fair, non-biased, compliant way. So what does that kind of look like? And it's kind of the bread and butter here why we named the company Reviewr, is that you actually are able to create what I call review buckets and workflows. So ideally speaking, we want to create automation where in the submission process, say you have 5 different award programs, the system would recognize which award that nominee belongs to, and it drops them into a bucket for you. Other organizations might do that in combination of like phase 1 review, phase 2 review, final selection review. But the goal here is you basically take a bucket and you build up with 2 things. One is a list of submissions, which again, ideally is automated. And then number 2 is a team or a pod who's in charge of reviewing it. So say this was a 30 under 30 award bucket, I could say I want Simon, Paula, and Mark to review all those submissions. So whenever they come into the system, they can physically only view the entries in their bucket. You might have a phase 2 review round, which is a totally different team using a totally different scorecard. Because they were not assigned to that bucket, they won't ever see those entries. So again, it's a way for you to kind of bifurcate out applications to teams to ensure that they're reviewing the right people. You're obviously sharing confidential information with the wrong people. Now, I think one of the cool things I want to do is open this up and we can start to build in a randomization. So for many of our clients, they say, you know what, I want every applicant to get reviewed the exact same number of times, but I also can't allow my review team to look at more than 25 people because they don't have the time. So they literally will come in here and say, okay, let's bulk select my submissions and give each one to 5 judges or to 15 judges, whatever that number looks like. And then equally and randomly, the system will actually distribute those submissions out to the review team. So in this example, we gave each one to, roughly 4 to 6 judges. So when Mark comes in, he's going to see Gabrielle, Leslie, Richard, and Sheldon. Now I can completely change this. I can re-sign this back out, but it's a way for us with literally one click, take your applications, send it off to the review team in a very fair, non-biased, equal, random manner. So then the last piece to that puzzle is the review. So when the review team comes into the system, they will then get a menu of all the applicants you want them to review. You can absolutely redact personal identifying information. So if you want them to review the merits of the nomination, have no idea who they are, just the content being submitted about them, you can. And then the review team will simply get a split screen. So half of the page is the applicant's profile, and then the other half is whatever your selection tool is. So again, we love having some type of mathematic-based rubric. That way we can leverage data to make decisions. So the goal here is that your review team can kind of side by side read through the nomination packet. Again, you can redact data. They can look at the file uploads. Those actually get embedded directly in the system, so they literally will never have to leave. They just side by side leave their comments, leave their notes, fill out their scores, and then once they're done, you as an admin actually get this leaderboard, and it's going to let you see a list from high to low, every single nominee, who reviewed them, how they individually scored, and how they collectively scored. So you can start to leverage this data to make decisions on who your highest and lowest rated nominations were, to either advance them with one click to the next phase of review. You can use this to deliberate. Maybe your team wants to kind of talk about the results and change things up, or this might be the end-all be-all selections. Many of our clients will also then take this in conjunction with either a public vote or a member favorite. So again, what better way to engage your membership than incorporating them in the review and or celebrating your nominations. So a lot of times our clients will take your nominations and then send them to a page like this. So you can pick and choose not only who shows up here, but what shows up here. And it's a way for you to kind of build out like a finalist list or showcase your winners. It shows you maybe like a headshot or a logo, who they are, and then maybe an abstract. And if you open it up, it actually pulls a public bio about that nominee. So there could be a full-blown image gallery over here. It could be videos, it could be photos. But this allows your membership or your audience to come in here, read more about your winners or about your nominees. And if you are going to tie in a member favorite type of concept, there is a built-in voting mechanism as well. This could also be really insightful if you're opening this up to the general audience, because sometimes you might have voters who are not members, and then you can send that off to your membership departments and have them kind of loop them in because they could be potential members in the future. So it's like a member recruitment lead generation type of concept. But it's a really cool way to take your winners and not just put them on your website with like a bunch of bullet points of, your winners. You can actually physically celebrate them and showcase their hard work and accomplishments. So with all that said, I'm going to jump back. I think it's 11:31. So hit that 30 mark exactly on the dot. But again, my goal today was to try to take some of the insights from that survey. There's some really good things there. And then again, the thing that kind of stood out to us was the lack of people who are using a dedicated award scholarship abstract platform. Yet we all realize the priority of creating efficiencies and the importance of these types of campaigns. So I'm going to kind of pause there for any questions you might have for me. Maybe we can kind of dive deeper into like audits of programs. It could be about the platform itself. It could be about kind of the space in general, but I want to make sure that I'm a resource to you guys to answer whatever questions I can. Yeah, so comment came out integrations with growth. It'd be in general. So integration is kind of a broad term, like what exactly is integration? We do single sign-on with nearly all AMSs. That's kind of the main initial integration, which is what would be necessary for you. From there, there's many ways to pass data back over to them. It just largely depends on what you're trying to do, right? So if you're trying to build like member engagement scores and things like that, and you want to track participation, you can. If you just want to log on their record participation in a program and some of the data, you can do things like that. So we kind of want to unpack a bit more what that would look like. But yes, a simple single sign-on would be like the very obvious integration. Again, we do it with almost all AMSs because we work closely with them. They're really good at what they do, which is kind of your database and your CRM for member activities. However, they don't have the tools in place to kind of power these full life cycles from start to finish. And so they obviously loop us in to be like the vendor to do that. Anything that we can ever do for any of you, please do let us know.